Hi everybody, we are back doing the crazy bread recipe, the cray cray bread recipe, and we are using instant yeast this time. So remember our yeast experiment, we had to activate the yeast with some warm water and sugar. Well, this time we do not need to do that step because the instant yeast, which I have right here, has many more yeast cells in it, remember? So it will activate as it's in the dough as we are adding the liquid right to the dry mixture. So typically instant yeast is added directly to the dry mixture. So if we look at our recipe, we preheated the oven to 450 degrees. Step 2 is combine your flour. So I am using the 125 of all-purpose flour, and I'm using my sifter just to combine, but you don't have to. You could just use a wooden spoon to combine. So I'm going to sift that through. I'm going to add my whole wheat flour right into the bowl because when you know that we don't have to sift that one. Then we've got our salt and sugar, okay, and our yeast right into the bowl there. So you could sift that all through, and it gets it mixed in quite nicely with the sifter. Okay. Otherwise, at home, you can just use a wooden spoon and get that mixed really well. Okay. So you'll see the yeast is already in the dry mixture. So now this is really easy. We are just adding our hot water. Remember, it's not boiling. It needs to be nice and warm, like a hot bath. Okay. So we're going to add that in step 3 and stir quickly until the mixture sticks together. Okay. So I don't like to dump it all in at once. I like to distribute it all around. Okay, so that we know that all the flour is going to get moistened and the yeast. Okay. Okay, just give that a nice stir and it should develop a nice ragged dough. So you see it's sticking to the spoon, so that's a good sign that we have enough moisture. Okay, this is good. Okay. And then step 4 is to form it into a ball, which, as you can see, it's already kind of done itself. All right, so we're going to take this and form it into a ball. We're going to take any dough that's stuck to the spoon, okay, rub that off, and take that ball and rub off any other bits that are stuck to the bowl. Okay. We're going to put that on a lightly floured surface and knead. So remember, push, fold, turn. If you need a little bit of flour on the heel of your hand so it doesn't stick, do so. Fold, turn, and so about 5 minutes. Okay, here we are at about the 5-minute mark of kneading your dough. So look at our dough, it's nice and smooth. Okay, that's how you know you've kneaded enough. One test is to see that it's smooth on the outside. Another test is to open up just the surface of the dough and see if there's tiny little blisters, little air pockets underneath. And then one last test is to push your finger into the dough and it should spring back. Okay? It should not leave an indent of where your finger is. That means you haven't developed enough gluten. Okay, so push your finger in and it should spring right back. Okay, do you see that? Springs right back. Good. So at this point, we are going to let that dough relax a little bit because what you've done, remember, is pulled those coils of glutenin and gliadin out. So you've pulled that spring out. You've developed the complex matrix here that's going to hold your carbon dioxide in, but it's really tight. It's like pulling on an elastic band. So if I try to roll that out now, it's just going to spring back like a pulled elastic band would. Okay, so you'll try and push it out and it'll spring right back. So if we let those gluten strands relax a little bit, so I just take the bowl I had before, put it over top so that the surface of the dough doesn't get dried out and crusty. Okay, so that'll allow those gluten strands that are pulled out tight to just relax a little bit. So that when you go roll it, it's like, okay, it's kind of like giving it a massage. Okay, so it'll stay where you want it to. All right, see you in 5. Okay, here we are, 5 minutes later. The gluten strands have relaxed now, hopefully. Okay, so we are going to try and roll this out now. So we're going to roll it into a rectangle about 1 centimeter thickness. I kind of usually just go about a pinky thickness. You know, we don't have to be exact. So if you want, I'm going to stand up now because I need to roll. Okay, I'll come down once in a while. To start off, if you want to get a rectangle, start off patting it into a rectangle first. Okay, it's always easier to get your shape if you start off with a good shape. Okay, so here we go, a little bit of flour on your rolling pin. Don't forget, and don't forget a little bit of flour underneath where you're rolling. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. Now, keep in mind, this is school recipes, all right? So we are doing small amounts. For my family, usually I quadruple this recipe. So some of us are cooking at home now and you have families to feed. So feel free to at least double, triple, quadruple the recipe, okay? So at this point, I am on step number 7. At home, you can use anything to cut this dough. So for us, we might have a metal spatula. At school, okay, we might have the bench scraper. And the other thing you can do at home is just a butter knife, okay? But be careful not to scratch the surface of your counter, okay? We could transfer this whole thing up to a cutting board and then cut with a sharper knife if you like. Okay, so remember, it's always better to cut with something sharper. Okay, so I'm going to use the bench scraper. We're going to cut it into 1 inch width. So again, we don't need to measure. I kind of go thumb width. That sounds about right. Okay, so I look up. There we go. So cut, and just try to keep them even. Remember, if we have some big and some thin, some fat and some skinny, they will not bake at the same rate. So I got about 9 strips there. You might get 10, you might get 8, that's fine. Okay, we're gonna put those onto a parchment lined baking sheet. If you don't have parchment, just spray your pan with cooking spray or a little bit of oil or shortening. Try not to use butter, that burns really easily. And only grease the part where you're putting the dough. If you grease your whole tray, the corners that don't have dough on it will get burnt and look really brown and sticky, and it's harder to clean. Here they are on the tray. I just want to show you there's 2 ways you can put it on the tray. You can either put them close together like this. The sides of your breadsticks will be a little softer, or you can spread them out a little further and you'll have a little bit more of a, you know, browned or, I wouldn't say crispy, but a little bit more crunchy sides, okay? So you can decide which way, but decide one or the other, okay, and then put it in. So I'm going to spread them out just so that makes it a little more consistent. Then I'll pop them in the oven for only 10 minutes. So you see, this type of bread recipe is much faster than the traditional, okay? And let's see the results. Let's see how different it is, okay? So if you've done one with active dry yeast and one with instant, we can do a little comparison. Here we are with the breadsticks come out of the oven. Look at, they're golden brown now. Okay, now with our pastry brush and some melted butter, we're going to brush on the melted butter, okay, and then sprinkle it all. Okay, so get that brushed on, and then sprinkle it all with Parmesan cheese. So your recipe doesn't really tell you how much butter. I melted about 15 milliliters. And about 1 milliliter of garlic powder added to it for some garlic flavor. Okay, so about 15 milliliters should be enough to cover just the tops of those breadsticks. Okay, and do be careful, they'll be very hot, so try not to touch the pan. And then we'll just sprinkle the Parmesan. So the butter will help the Parmesan to stick to the breadsticks. There's our crazy breadsticks. They look nice and golden and cheesy. So you could choose to put the butter and Parmesan on before you put it in the oven. The Parmesan will get quite brown though, so that's a risk you take. This way the Parmesan stays white. The other things you can sprinkle on top instead of Parmesan, if you don't like Parmesan, are coarse salt. It'll taste more like a pretzel almost. Herbs, okay, chopped chives, anything, be creative. Grated cheddar cheese, any of that. Also with this recipe, you can make it any shape that you want. So my son made it the other day into a baguette shape. So you can be creative. Okay, so there's your cheesy breadstick. Mmm, delicious. Pretty crazy. Makes me crazy. Bye.